General Hospital will reveal Drew was officially dead, but his demise was not just another assassination in Port Charles, nor was it the work of the city's underground forces or his many political enemies. Instead, his end was a horrifying tragedy born from his own sins, secrets so vile that they could not remain hidden forever. The man who once navigated the murky waters of power, corruption, and deceit had finally met his reckoning, and the person who delivered it was not a hired gun or a rival politician. It was someone no one would have ever suspected, Willow, the woman who had once been the love of his life, but also the one who had uncovered the unspeakable truth about him. For months, Drew had built an empire on deception, manipulating those around him while keeping his personal transgressions buried beneath layers of charm and strategic lies. He had walked a fine line between success and destruction, convinced that he was untouchable. But fate had a cruel way of exposing even the most well-guarded secrets, and for Drew, the revelation came at the hands of Willow, the very person he had once sworn to protect. What she discovered was not just betrayal, it was an act so repulsive, so morally corrupt, that it shattered the very foundation of her existence. Drew had not only deceived her, but he had done so in the most unforgivable way imaginable. He had slept with Nina, her mother. The man she had trusted, the man she had defended, had crossed a boundary that could never be undone. The revelation hit her like a storm, leaving nothing but devastation in its wake. It was not just a violation of their love, it was a violation of her very sense of self. Willow had always been strong, had always fought for what was right, but this was a darkness she had never encountered before. The weight of it suffocated her, made her blood run cold. How could Drew have done this? How could he have looked her in the eye, professed his love, and then betrayed her in such a despicable way? The answers didn't matter anymore. There was no redemption, no explanation that could undo the horror of what he had done. And in the end, it wasn't fate, nor the streets of Port Charles, nor the corruption of politics that sealed his fate. It was Willow's rage. Her pain. Her need for justice in the most final way possible. Everything began when Willow accidentally uncovered a shocking truth. Drew, the man she had trusted with her heart, had betrayed her in an unforgivable way. It wasn't just about his descent into the murky depths of political corruption, his manipulation, and blackmail of the vulnerable. Those were sins she might have been able to rationalize, even if they sickened her. But this? This was far worse. Drew had crossed a line so vile, so reprehensible, that it shattered every illusion she had ever held about him. He had been sleeping with Nina, her mother. The sheer revulsion crashed over Willow like a tidal wave, a sickening churn in her stomach as the reality of what she had discovered set in. The man she had loved, defended, and sacrificed for was nothing more than a depraved liar who had trampled over her dignity without a second thought. He had stood beside her, whispered promises of devotion, held her in his arms, all while hiding this monstrous truth. Every moment they had shared, every touch, every word of affection, now felt tainted, corrupted by his deceit. It wasn't just betrayal, it was humiliation, a cruel, grotesque mockery of the love she had once believed was real. The realization turned her love for him into something unrecognizable, something poisonous. The Drew she thought she knew had never truly existed. He wasn't just a man who had broken her heart. He was something far worse, a man who had stripped away her very sense of self, leaving behind nothing but fury, disgust, and an unrelenting need for justice. Unable to endure the brutal truth, Willow confronted Drew. Her fury erupted like a raging storm, shaking her to the core. But instead of remorse, instead of even a flicker of guilt, Drew met her anger with chilling indifference. He stood there, arms crossed, an infuriating smirk on his face, as if her pain amused him. He didn't beg for forgiveness. He didn't try to justify himself. He didn't even offer a hollow excuse. Instead, he mocked her. Called her naive. Told her she had always been too blind to see the world for what it really was. His words cut deeper than any knife, slicing through the last remnants of the love she had once held for him. Each syllable was a fresh wound, a cruel reminder that the man she had devoted herself to had never truly existed. She had spent so much time defending him, standing by his side, even when her own family had warned her against him. She had fought for him, believed in him, risked everything for him. And for what? To be repaid with this despicable betrayal? To learn that the man she had once given her heart to was nothing more than a monster in disguise? The realization crashed over her like a tidal wave. There was nothing left of the Drew she had once known. The man before her was not just a liar. He was a predator, a manipulator, someone who took pleasure in destroying the very people who loved him. Her rage burned hotter, her disgust choked her, and in that moment, she knew, Drew could not walk away from this unscathed. Not this time. Not after what he had done. Unable to endure the brutal truth, Willow confronted Drew, her hands trembling with rage, her heart pounding so violently in her chest that it threatened to drown out the sound of her own thoughts. The moment she laid eyes on him, standing there so arrogantly, as if nothing had changed, as if his sins could be ignored or brushed aside, her fury only intensified. But what shattered her completely was not just his betrayal, it was his response to it. Drew didn't flinch. He didn't look ashamed. He didn't stammer out an apology or offer up some desperate excuse to justify the horror of what he had done. Instead, he stood there with an infuriating smirk curling at the corners of his lips, his eyes gleaming with something almost smug. As if her suffering was amusing. As if her pain was nothing more than an unfortunate but unavoidable consequence of his actions. "Are you really surprised?" His voice was calm, almost bored, as though he was discussing something trivial, something meaningless. "Come on, Willow. You've always been so naive. So eager to believe in fairy tales, in happily ever afters. But the world doesn't work like that. You should have known better." The words were a slap across the face, each syllable cutting into her like a razor blade. Naive? That was what he thought of her. After everything they had been through, after all the sacrifices she had made for him, he dismissed her love, her devotion, as nothing more than foolishness. He didn't regret his actions. He didn't care that he had betrayed her in the most unthinkable way. He wasn't ashamed of what he had done with Nina, of the way he had desecrated every memory they had shared. He was proud of it. Willow's stomach churned with nausea, her entire body recoiling from the sheer vileness of it all. How had she not seen it before? How had she spent so much time blinded by love, refusing to acknowledge the darkness lurking beneath Drew's charming facade? How had she been so utterly fooled? She had defended him when no one else would. She had believed in him, even when her own family had warned her that he was dangerous, that he was nothing more than a manipulator playing a long game. She had stood by his side, had fought for him, had turned against those she loved just to prove to the world that he was more than what they said he was. And for what? For this? For him to look her in the eyes, completely unbothered, and reduce her to nothing more than a pathetic fool who had let herself be deceived. Something inside her snapped. The weight of her grief, of her fury, of her humiliation, all of it boiled over in an instant, transforming into something raw, something uncontrollable. Her breathing came in shallow, uneven gasps, her vision blurred with unshed tears of rage. She wanted to scream, to make him hurt the way he had hurt her, to force him to feel even a fraction of the agony that was tearing her apart from the inside out. But Drew just chuckled, shaking his head as if she were nothing more than a child throwing a tantrum. "Don't be so dramatic," he murmured, stepping toward her as though he wasn't the villain in this nightmare, as though he had any right to be near her. "You'll get over it. You always do." That was it. That was the moment she knew, Drew was beyond saving. Beyond redemption. There was no ounce of humanity left in him, no shred of guilt, no flicker of the man she had once loved. He was a monster, a soulless creature who thrived on manipulation and destruction. And she couldn't let him walk away from this unscathed. Not this time. Not after what he had done. News of Drew's death spread through Port Charles like wildfire, sending shockwaves through every corner of the city. Whispers filled the air, speculation ran rampant, and theories about who could have finally taken him down were endless. Some believed it had been one of his many political enemies, a rival who had grown tired of his corruption and deceit. Others suspected the criminal underworld had finally caught up with him, repaying him for the power plays he had orchestrated in the shadows. But no one could have imagined the truth. It wasn't a hired gun. It wasn't a vengeful mobster. It wasn't the result of a calculated assassination. It was Willow. The woman who had once stood by his side, who had loved him, defended him, sacrificed for him, she had been the one to end him. The one who, in a single, irreversible moment, had pulled the trigger and sealed his fate. The weight of that truth, if revealed, would send Port Charles into a frenzy, shaking the city to its core in ways no one could predict. But the question that truly mattered now wasn't who had killed Drew. His sins had long written the ending of his story. No, the only question left was what would happen to Willow. Could she live with what she had done? Could she wake up each morning knowing that she had taken a life, knowing that the blood on her hands could never be washed away? Or would this moment, the rage, the betrayal, the finality of it all, consume her? Would it be a weight she could never escape, a shadow that would haunt her every breath, every heartbeat, for the rest of her life? Only time would tell. But one thing was certain, Willow's life would never be the same again. Drew's death at the hands of Willow not only marked the end of his tumultuous story in General Hospital but also served as the official farewell of actor Cameron Mathison from the long-running soap opera. His departure sent shockwaves through the GH fanbase, as many had not expected his storyline to reach such a dramatic and permanent conclusion. While the character of Drew had made many enemies, both politically and personally, few could have predicted that his ultimate downfall would come at the hands of the woman who had once loved him. This unexpected twist not only ended Drew's reign of manipulation and betrayal but also sealed Mathison's exit from the show, closing a significant chapter in his career. For months, speculation had surrounded Drew's fate, with fans debating whether he would meet his end through an assassination tied to his corrupt dealings or if he would find a way to escape the growing threats against him. But GH delivered the ultimate shocker. His death was not orchestrated by his political rivals or the criminal underworld but by Willow herself, the one person who had once defended him against the world. The revelation that Drew had not only betrayed her trust but had done so in the most despicable way imaginable by engaging in an affair with her mother, Nina, had driven Willow past the point of no return. In a moment of fury, pain, and utter devastation, she pulled the trigger, ending his life and, unknowingly, changing the course of her own forever. As news of Drew's death spread across Port Charles, rumors ran wild about who could have been responsible. Some assumed it had been a calculated hit, a rival eliminating him for political power. Others suspected the mob had finally gotten to him, given his increasingly dangerous dealings. But the truth, that it was Willow, consumed by righteous fury and heartbreak, was something no one could have expected. Her act of vengeance was not just an impulsive outburst, it was the culmination of months of deceit, manipulation, and emotional destruction inflicted upon her by Drew. And yet, despite the deep betrayal, despite the horror of what he had done, the reality of his death would not be easy for her to bear. While the storyline itself was gripping and intense, what made this moment even more significant was that it marked Cameron Mathison's final episode on General Hospital. The actor, who had portrayed Drew for years, officially chose not to renew his contract, meaning that his character's shocking demise was also his exit from the GH canvas. Fans were left in disbelief as the realization set in, Drew was truly gone, and Mathison would not be returning. Mathison's tenure on General Hospital had been filled with ups and downs, and his portrayal of Drew had gone through many different phases, from a man struggling to rebuild his life after captivity to a corrupted politician who pushed boundaries too far. His departure signified the end of an era, leaving a gap in the cast that many were unsure how the show would fill. While some speculated that GH could eventually recast the role of Drew, the definitive and brutal nature of his death seemed to suggest otherwise. The impact of Drew's demise would undoubtedly send shockwaves throughout Port Charles. Willow's actions, though fueled by heartbreak and rage, would not be without consequences. Could she live with the weight of what she had done? Would she face legal repercussions if the truth were ever revealed? And how would Nina, Carly, and the rest of Drew's connections react when they learned what had really happened? Though Cameron Mathison's time on General Hospital has come to an end, his exit leaves behind an unforgettable storyline, one that will continue to affect the show's landscape for months to come. Fans will now have to wait and see how the fallout from Drew's shocking murder unfolds and what it means for the future of GH. One thing is for certain, his death is not just the end of a character, but the beginning of a whole new chapter of drama, secrets, and consequences that will shape the lives of those he left behind.